Tonight we'll drift into another time, a time where the Nile whispered to reeds under moonlight, where incense curled like ancient secrets in the air, and where sandals padded softly across warm sandstone streets. You're in good company now. There's no rush here, no noise, nothing but the slow unravelling of history and the gentlest voice I can offer. So go ahead, dim your lights, tuck yourself under your favourite blanket, and let your mind loosen, like silk slipping from a shoulder. And if this calm journey helps you unwind, helps you forget your day, maybe give a soft little tap to like and subscribe. Only if it feels right. There's no pressure here, just comfort. Now, close your eyes if you like, or stare softly at a flickering flame nearby, and allow me to tell you about something most people don't expect when they think of ancient Egypt. What was sex really like in ancient Egypt? Not the mythologized, dramatic temple affairs or scandalous Cleopatra tales, but the everyday intimacy, the rituals before a kiss, the laughter behind a curtain, the smell of perfumed oil dabbed in places meant never to be spoken of aloud. Let's begin somewhere gentle. The first time I saw the papyrus of pleasure, it was by accident. Not in a museum, though it should be there. No, it was tucked into a leather satchel at a Cairo antique stall, behind a stack of chipped alabaster jars and a birdcage that may or may not have still contained some part of mummified ibis. The vendor, sleepy-eyed and unimpressed, had no idea what he had. Or perhaps he did and didn't want to seem too eager. Now, I don't read demotic Egyptian fluently, but a friend of mine, a dusty professor who wears glasses thick enough to be considered time travel devices, translated enough for me to know. This wasn't just a poem. It was advice, flirtation, humour. There was something about how to comb your beard before a lover's visit, and the best time to sneak a date under the moon. Literal dates, the fruit, not romantic appointments. The ancient Egyptians, it turns out, were rather sweet about the whole thing. Sensual, yes, and deeply magical, but also practical, playful, and sometimes just very, very sleepy after a good meal of figs and bread soaked in beer. Imagine now, if you will, lying on a low couch near a shaded courtyard, the scent of blue lotus in the air, faintly sweet, almost like warm vanilla with a whisper of something floral and heavy, like night-blooming jasmine. There's a soft splash from a clay basin where someone just dipped their feet. A fan made of palm fronds sways lazily in someone else's hand. And two young lovers, let's call them Nettie and Dedu, sit across from one another, giggling quietly, trying not to wake an elderly aunt who sleeps nearby. She snores gently, head tilted back like a goose in prayer. Dedu has just offered Nettie a pastry made of honey and sesame. It's a little too crumbly. She laughs when it falls apart in her lap, and he apologizes profusely, but his eyes are lit with mischief. He tells her that in the Temple of Hathor, they say honey mixed with myrrh can make any heart soft. She tells him that she doesn't need a spell to fall for him, just more pastries that don't fall apart. There's a word for this kind of moment in ancient Egyptian, neher. It means eternal recurrence, a kind of timeless now. Not the forever of gods, but the forever of everyday things. Laughter, bread baking, fingers brushing against fingers under the table. It's easy to think of the ancients as distant and stoic, but they had jokes about farting. They argued about chores. They whispered things under their breath when the children weren't listening. And when they made love, it wasn't just about ritual or lineage. It was about joy, sometimes clumsy joy. Did you know that in a letter preserved from around 1250 BCE, a woman wrote to her absent lover, "I wish you would come back, if only to smell your shirt again." The scent of someone. Now that's intimacy, isn't it? Not just bodies, but memories wrapped in cloth and sweat and perfume. The walls of temples bore images of gods, but the walls of homes? Sometimes they bore scratched hearts and silly drawings. One was found of a man chasing a woman who carried a fish. No one knows why. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe he's just really wanted that fish. As we settle deeper into this tale, you might wonder, were there taboos? Of course. Were there rituals? Oh yes, many. But between those formalities lived the heartbeat of something warmer, softer, more human. A moment when two people met under starlight and shared pomegranate seeds, sticky fingers brushing, laughing because they both looked like they were bleeding. And then came the kissing. Not the modern kind, lips barely touched, more like a blessing, a tasting, a way of saying, I see you and you are safe here. I imagine the air, still and thick with the scent of cooling sand, as lovers found one another in the shadows of reed houses or rooftop gardens. The sound of distant tambourines from a feast carried lazily on the wind, and beneath those sounds, the softer music of breath, laughter, and the rustle of linen slipping from shoulders. In the world of ancient Egypt, sex wasn't a secret, but it wasn't crude either. It was part of the cosmos, a dance between order and chaos, much like the stories of the gods themselves. Take, for example, the myth of Geb and Nut, the earth and the sky, forever reaching for one another but held apart by Shu, the god of air. Their longing created the space in which life could exist. Desire was the engine of creation. Let me pour us another cup of story slowly. There's no hurry here. I'll tell you next about a wedding night that was interrupted by a goat. Not a metaphorical goat. Very real, very determined goat that had no respect for romantic timing. But for now, let's rest in the courtyard with Nettie and Dedu. She's wiping crumbs from her lap, and he's telling her that she looks like a priestess when the candlelight hits her eyes. She rolls her eyes, but she's smiling. A breeze lifts the edge of a linen curtain. Somewhere a flute begins to play, and as we leave that warm courtyard, now, let your mind wander too. Let me take you somewhere quieter now, past the city walls of Thebes, where the bustle fades into the hush of the desert's breath. The night hums low and steady, a velvet lullaby stretching across the dunes. Not far from the Nile, in a village whose name has long since melted into dust, there's a small house with mud brick walls the colour of warm honey. Its roof is flat, built for stargazing and gossip. And outside the door, 2 pairs of sandals rest neatly side by side. It's a tiny detail, isn't it? But in ancient Egypt, sandals by the door told a quiet story. Visitors didn't wear shoes inside. It was considered rude, unclean, and frankly, quite sandy. So if you saw 2 sets of sandals waiting patiently by the threshold, you knew someone was keeping company. And maybe, just maybe, they weren't talking about taxes. Tonight in that small house, the oil lamps flicker low. A clay jar sweats with cool water drawn from the well earlier in the day. The walls are bare except for one thing, a painted eye, drawn carefully with coal and charcoal. The eye of Horus, not for spying, for protection, for blessing the sacred. Because yes, love was sacred, even if it was also a bit silly sometimes. Inside, Maya and Seneb are stretched out on woven mats. They're not married, not yet, but the neighbours know, everyone always knows, and no one really minds. There's a sort of unspoken rule in their village. What happens behind closed shutters stays as private as a tomb. Seneb, tall and a little awkward, is telling a story about the time a crocodile stole his father's fishing net. Maya keeps interrupting with better punchlines. She has this laugh, deep and unexpected, like thunder sneaking into a sunny sky. Their elbows touch, and then stay touching. In ancient Egyptian poetry, lovers often spoke in metaphors. My heart is like a wild goose caught in your snare, one might write. Or, your voice is sweeter than figs in flood season. But in real life, sometimes love sounded more like, you still smell like onions from the market, get away from me. That's part of the charm, the mixture of sacred and silly, the blend of perfume and sweat. Let's imagine Maya leaning over to trace Seneb's eyebrow with the tip of her finger. She says, "You missed a spot shaving." He pulls away, embarrassed. "Don't look at me, I had no mirror." But he smiles anyway, because deep down he hopes she notices everything. There was a ritual, very simple, very private, that some couples performed before intimacy. A dab of myrrh on each wrist, a kiss to the forehead, a shared drink of date wine, warm and syrupy. These weren't laws or commandments, just gestures, like hanging your lover's amulet near the bed or hiding a flower inside their sandals for them to find in the morning. And oh, the flowers, the blue lotus especially. It wasn't just a pretty thing, it had properties, mildly narcotic, slightly euphoric. You'd crush the petals and soak them in wine, then sip until the world softened around the edges. That's when secrets slipped out like silk and hands found each other more easily in the dark. Did you know that the god Nefertem, patron of the blue lotus, was said to rise from a flower every morning at sunrise? His name meant beautiful and complete. And that's how many Egyptians thought love should feel, like blooming slowly, completely, in the warmth of dawn or the hush of dusk. Maya, lying beside Seneb, reaches for a small bundle of linen. She unwraps it to reveal 2 pieces of sweet bread, shaped like little cows, a joke. Earlier that day, she told him he eats like a starving calf. Now she's brought him snacks to match. They eat in silence for a moment, the candle crackling softly. The bread is chewy, laced with honey and coriander, sweet and spicy, like the night. The walls breathe with them. The air is heavy with the smell of lamp oil and warm skin. Outside, a donkey brays once, then quiets again. And just before the lamp sputters out, Seneb whispers, "If I were a god, I'd carve your name in the stars." Maya rolls her eyes, but she doesn't argue. In many households, intimacy wasn't kept secret, but it was deeply respected. Children might sleep nearby, aunts and uncles might grumble, but everyone understood that love was part of life, like bread and death and taxes. There was even a term in ancient medical texts, serit, a condition of lovesickness. It was considered a real ailment. Symptoms included short breath, distracted thoughts, and sudden bursts of poetry. Remedies varied, but the best was said to be physical closeness, touch, warmth, the body remembering it wasn't alone. And when the morning came, because it always does, the sandals would still be by the door, a little dustier, maybe slightly out of line, but still together. In some tombs, they found pairs of sandals buried side by side. Worn soles, cracked leather, soft from use. Proof of a journey walked together. Even in death, they said, a lover should never have to walk barefoot. Now, imagine Seneb waking up with Maya's hair in his mouth. He's too polite to say anything, but he's blinking rapidly and trying not to sneeze. She mumbles something about goats and rolls away, pulling the mat with her. It's awkward. It's perfect. And as the sun slips its fingers through the cracks in the walls, the house glows gold. 2 sandals, 1 love, and a whole day ahead to mess it all up again. Now, let your mind drift forward, past the sandals, the bread, the laughter, to another night in a different part of Egypt. This time, we'll be under the stars, on a rooftop filled with music and a little too much wine. But for now, rest in this warmth, where love lingers like the scent of lotus and the quiet promise of another evening to come. Can you hear it? A slow drum beat muffled by distance, the echo of feet on stone, laughter lifted lazily into the evening sky. We're climbing now, stone steps worn smooth by generations, warm under our feet from the day's fading sun. Up and up, past the hum of dinner being cleared, past a cat cleaning its paws on a windowsill, to a rooftop lit by torchlight and touched by starlight. Welcome to Memphis, around 1250 BCE. Not the one with guitars and rhinestones, the older Memphis, the capital of ancient Egypt when the gods still danced in festivals and the night air was filled with the perfume of roasted lamb and fig wine. We're on the roof of a scribe's home, and tonight is a gathering. Nothing formal, nothing planned, just friends, neighbours, and a few too many cups of that sweet golden brew they call heke. Honeyed beer, thick and hazy, like someone tried to bottle the sun. In the corner sits Tay, our host. She's small, sharp-eyed, and has one of those laughs that hits you in the ribs even if you don't know the joke. She's brought her harp, not the big ones you see in temples, but a little shoulder harp strung with thin gut and inlaid with blue faience. She plucks a few strings, adjusting them by ear, and the music settles around us like a silk shawl. The story tonight isn't just hers, everyone here is part of it. Over there, Baki and his new wife are whispering near the edge of the rooftop, where the view of the Nile catches the moon just right. She's wearing too much perfume, and he's pretending not to notice that it's dripping down her neck. It's a perfume made of cardamom and crushed lilies, heady, a little too bold, like wearing your feelings on your sleeve. But she doesn't care. This is her wedding night after all. The customs of Egyptian marriage were less dramatic than you might think. No vows shouted in public. No towering cakes, just a shared home, a shared bed, and, if things went well, shared sandals by the door, as we've seen. Marriage contracts were common among the wealthier classes, often outlining everything from inheritance to how many loaves of bread a wife could expect weekly. But for most people, love was quieter. It happened over shared meals and morning yawns. A woman might move into her partner's home, the neighbours would nod, and that was that. But tonight is special. Tay begins to sing. The lyrics are old, passed down through generations, but no one minds. They speak of two lovers meeting under a fig tree, of fingers stained with juice, of stolen kisses that taste of sugar and dirt. It's not a perfect voice, but it's real. And when she reaches the line about eyes like the dark part of the date pit, someone sighs loudly. Laughter follows. A small clay lamp flickers near the wine jug, casting long shadows that sway like dancers. The breeze is just cool enough to raise goosebumps, but soft enough to feel like a blessing. And in this moment, every heart on that roof beats just a little slower. Then there's Chaim, the quiet one, who's been sitting in the corner sketching all night. He's got papyrus on his lap and a reed pen dipped in ink. He doesn't look up much, but he sees everything. Later, someone will find his drawings. Crooked faces, a pair of joined hands, the curve of a back against fading light. A record of love, not with words, but with lines that tremble from truth. As the night deepens, the jokes turn a little bolder. Someone makes a quip about Hathor's 7 secrets of seduction, and Tay nearly chokes on her wine. No one knows all 7, of course, but they like to guess. One girl says, "It starts with the neck," and suddenly everyone is showing off their best slow-motion shoulder turns. Even the priest's son blushes. He's only here because he said he was studying astronomy. Which, to be fair, he sort of is. The stars are especially bright tonight. Above them, Orion climbs toward the zenith. The Egyptians called it Sa, a sacred constellation. To them, it was Osiris rising, and they believed the souls of the worthy became stars, forever watching, forever shining. Maybe in some distant sky there's a star laughing along with us now. One that remembers what it was like to drink too much wine and confess that your heart feels like a papyrus boat in flood season, completely out of control and drifting towards something dangerous and sweet. Tay sets her harp down. Now it's Baki's turn. He stands, nervous, swaying just a little. "I have a poem," he announces, "but I didn't write it." Everyone groans. He grins. He recites anyway. It's short. It's about how his wife's hair looks like the wings of a black ibis. Bit odd, sure, but somehow it works. She claps and throws a dried fig at him. This too is intimacy. Not just the bedroom kind, but the closeness of shared space, shared breath, shared embarrassment. Someone spills wine, someone else offers a date rolled in sesame seeds, and overhead the stars blink slowly like they're trying not to wake the gods. There's something beautifully human about these moments, the kind that never make it into history books but live on in the cracks between monuments. They remind us that passion isn't always epic. Sometimes it's sticky fingers and off-key songs and the thrill of hearing your name in someone else's voice. As the night winds down, people begin to drift off. Some lie on mats, others curl up on stairs. One couple has fallen asleep still holding hands, their fingers slack but touching. Tay hums a final note. It's not a real song, just sound, low and soft, like a lullaby whispered to the wind. And just before the last lamp goes out, someone murmurs, This is what the afterlife should feel like." Maybe it already is. And as we leave that rooftop behind with its empty cups and full hearts, let your mind wander now to a quieter place. A garden behind temple walls where lilies bloom under moonlight and the rituals of love take on a sacred shape. But we'll go slowly. There's time. We're in Dendera now, a little south of the sharp noise of politics and palaces. The city hums quietly beneath the night sky, wrapped in the dark velvet of palm shadows and the faintest rustle of river reeds. And here, hidden behind the thick limestone walls of the great temple of Hathor, lies a secret garden. It isn't marked on any map. It doesn't need to be. The priestesses know the path by heart, worn sandals treading soft patterns into the dust. Past the incense room, past the antechamber with ceilings painted like stars, down a small passage where echoes fold into themselves like whispers in sleep. And then, light. Moonlight, soft and fluid, spills into a courtyard open to the sky. The air is thick with the perfume of white lotus and crushed mint. You can smell the papyrus flowers bending gently in the wind, their edges brushing the water of a shallow pool, round and still as a priestess's eye. This is the Garden of Hathor, the goddess of music, love, pleasure, beauty, and sleep. Yes, sleep. Did you know that in certain hymns she's described as the mistress of sweet slumber? Those who prayed to her didn't just ask for passion, they asked for rest after it. The good kind of tired, the kind that pulls you into your lover's chest, skin warm and dreams even warmer. Tonight a quiet ceremony unfolds. Not the kind with trumpets and processions, no. This is more personal. In one corner of the garden, beneath the branches of a fig tree, a young woman named Nebet kneels with a clay bowl in her hands. She's alone, but not lonely. She's preparing a love charm, not to win someone over, but to bless the love she already has, a protection, a promise. She mixes crushed rose petals, ground cinnamon, and a few drops of sacred oil, bitter and sweet like the memory of an argument smoothed by a kiss. She whispers her lover's name into the mixture, not loudly, just enough that the leaves can hear. There's a belief here. When you say a name in a sacred place, it becomes part of the story, even if it's never written down. Nearby, a priestess sits tuning a small sistrum, a rattle-like instrument shaped like a doorway. Its chimes sound like silver rain falling on copper rooftops. She'll play it later, during the soft part of the rite, when the oil is warmed and brushed across the skin. This wasn't about seduction. Not here. This was about opening the heart like a bloom, slowing the breath, recalling what it feels like to be touched gently, not just with hands, but with care. Can you feel that warmth? Let me tell you something small but strange. In the temple archives, there's a record of a woman who requested a blessing for her belly to remember his voice. That's all it says. No spell, no ingredients, just that request. Isn't that beautiful? Some loves leave echoes deep inside us, not just in the heart, but in the body, like when someone laughs and your skin tingles, or when you hear a familiar song and your stomach flips in recognition. Ancient Egyptians believed that memory lived in the flesh, that love imprinted itself on you cell by cell. Nebet finishes her charm. She buries it gently near the fig tree, placing a single strip of linen over it. On the linen is a symbol, two open hands touching at the fingertips. It means unity, or completion, or sometimes just you and me. Now, from the upper colonnade, soft music begins. Flutes and the quiet hum of women's voices in unison, not in words but in vowels stretched long like the horizon. Nebet doesn't look up. She's not here for spectacle. She simply closes her eyes and lets the sound pass over her like wind. Do you know what she's remembering? The first time her lover brushed the back of her hand. That was it. Just that. No embrace, no kiss, just a fingertip grazing across her knuckles during a meal. It lit something in her, something slower than fire, deeper than breath. That's the kind of intimacy the Egyptians knew well, the kind that says, I see you, even when no one else does. In this garden, the stories of love aren't loud. They're petals pressed between pages. They're footprints worn into stone by those who walked this path again and again, seeking something simple and sacred, connection. Sometimes couples came here together, sometimes alone. Sometimes they didn't even believe in the rituals. They just liked the peace. There was no punishment for doubt, only silence, and flowers, and time. Time to remember. Nebet stands now, brushing off her knees. She leaves without speaking, no grand finale, no miracle, just a woman carrying her own magic home. And as the pool stills again, reflecting the moon, we are left with the feeling that something has been understood, not explained, just felt. Let your mind settle here for a moment longer, in the hush of this garden, where even the gods tiptoe. And now, let's wander to another place, a city, a market, somewhere brighter, louder, a little messier. There's a story waiting for us there, between stalls of dried dates and old gossip. But first, Breathe. Let's walk now, slowly, as the morning sun stretches its golden arms over the city of Akhmim. It's early, just enough heat in the air to warm the stones underfoot, but not yet enough to make you seek the shade. The street is narrow, uneven, and busy in that sleepy sort of way. Traders are only just lifting their shutters. Dogs bark once and then promptly lie back down. Someone's sweeping the dust into a newer, more polite pile, and the smell of fresh bread follows you like an eager puppy. This is the market district. Nothing grand, no gold-leafed columns or giant statues, but more alive than any palace. And at the very centre of it all, under a tattered strip of linen that serves as shade, sits a woman named Tarja. The date seller. She's older, maybe 60, maybe older still, but her eyes are sharp enough to cut thread. Her stall is simple, baskets and bowls, each filled to the brim with dates in every stage of readiness. Wrinkled black ones soaked in wine, fat golden ones still sticky with sap. Some are rolled in sesame, some stuffed with almonds, and every date has a story. She always says that. You want the right date for the right mood, and then she'll peer at you, squinting just slightly, before selecting one with the same care a scribe chooses a word. To the untrained eye, it's just fruit. To Tarja, it's matchmaking. A boy, barely 15, approaches the stall. Nervous, sweaty. He shifts from foot to foot. Tarja watches him like a cat with a beetle. "You're here for a first date," she says without being asked. He nods furiously. She chuckles low and warm. "For that, you want something soft, but not too sticky. She shouldn't think you're trying too hard. No pits. You don't want her spitting halfway through a flirt." She chooses a pair of golden bar-high dates, slices them, and tucks a bit of crushed walnut inside. "Give her one. If she smiles, she's yours. If she sneezes, run." The boy laughs, not sure if she's joking. He pays and scurries off, clutching the little wrapped bundle like it's sacred. And in a way, it is. Food in ancient Egypt was never just food. It was offering, it was message, it was magic wrapped in pastry. Tarja knows this better than most. She didn't always sell dates. Once, long ago, she was a temple singer. Her voice could make statues weep, they said. Men offered her cattle just to hear one song, but she fell in love with a man who could barely keep bees alive, let alone offer a dowry. They ran away together, ate figs by the river, slept on roofs, laughed until their ribs hurt, and then he was gone, taken by a fever, or maybe by the gods. No one was sure, but Tarja stayed, and the music stayed with her, in the rhythm of the market, the rustle of date palms, the soft sigh she makes when she ties each bundle just so. A woman approaches next, confident, draped in white linen that glows in the sun. Tarja doesn't speak this time, just hands her a dark, sun-dried date dusted with cinnamon and pepper. The woman raises an eyebrow. "Spicy?" Tarja smiles. "You look like someone who knows exactly what she wants." They both laugh. In many Egyptian households, dates were offered not just as snacks, but as part of intimacy itself. They were thought to warm the blood, sweeten the breath, and awaken, well, you can imagine. Love potions weren't bubbling cauldrons. They were honey, dates, a bit of wine, and a lot of hoping. Back at the stall, Tarja's youngest grandchild has arrived, all curls and dust and stubbornness. He tugs at her sleeve. "What kind of date do you want, Nana?" She pauses, her weathered fingers still over a bowl of glossy medules. Then after a moment she whispers, "One that tastes like a memory." The child blinks. "Do memories taste sweet?" She shrugs. "Some do. Some taste like tears." And that's the thing, isn't it? Intimacy, in all its forms, touch, food, laughter, carries the weight of memory. A date eaten during a moonlit walk. A piece of bread shared after a fight. The smell of your lover's hand after crushing mint between fingers. It all lingers. It all stays. A customer brings her back to the moment. An older man clearly trying to impress someone much younger. "Something romantic," he says with a theatrical wink. Tarja hands him 2 overripe dates soaked in wine, pressed together like a kiss. She calls them Ra's blessing. He walks off smugly and she mutters, "She'll leave before dessert." You see, Tarja doesn't sell fruit. She sells stories wrapped in sweetness. She's the keeper of the little rituals, The things that never made it into temple records or royal tombs. The kinds of love that were messy, everyday, imperfect. The kind that smelled of sweat and honey and whispered jokes. And if you asked her about sex, she'd laugh, slap your arm gently and say, "What is sex but hunger with a little more poetry?" And she'd be right. As the sun creeps higher, she starts to pack up, rolling cloth over the baskets, humming a tune from her temple days, a melody no one else remembers. The street grows busier, the day louder, but her corner remains soft, safe, sweet. And as she ties the final knot on her bundle of dates, she looks toward the horizon and smiles. Somewhere, a boy is handing a girl a walnut-stuffed date. Somewhere else, someone is biting into sweetness and remembering a voice long gone. And somewhere, maybe even here, someone is resting under a blanket, listening to the soft clatter of market life in their dreams. Now, let's leave Taja to her humming and let your thoughts drift toward another tale. One hidden within a library, on a scroll no one was supposed to read. But we'll read it. Together. There's a special kind of silence inside an old library. Not just the absence of sound, but a weight, a hush, like someone's holding their breath on every shelf. Tonight we find ourselves in one such place. Not the grand libraries of Alexandria with their towering columns and golden statues, but something smaller, older, and far more intimate. A scribal chamber tucked deep in the temple complex at Abydos. Far from the bustle of priests and pilgrims, hidden behind a carved wooden door whose hinges creak just enough to feel alive. Inside, stacks of papyrus neatly bundled, a floor covered in reed mats, oil lamps flickering gently, casting long shadows on walls inked with prayers. The air smells like soot and crushed cedarwood, smoky, sharp, sacred. And in the corner, seated on a low stool with legs folded and spine bent like a question mark, is the temple's record keeper, Old Beck. Beck doesn't talk much. His job is to remember, not to speak. His fingers are stained black with ink, and he always has a reed pen tucked behind one ear, like a lazy feather. By day he copies hymns and tax records. By night, well, sometimes Beck reads things no one else is supposed to, like tonight. He's just pulled out a scroll hidden inside a hollowed-out brick. It has no title, no official seal. The papyrus is worn thin at the edges, its once crisp fibers softened by centuries of breath and handling. This is known among scribes as the Scroll of Unspoken Things. Beck unfurls it slowly, as if peeling back the skin of time, and he reads. Let me read it with you. The first line is simple. There are words we do not write in the light. A good start. The scroll isn't a diary, nor is it a spell book. It's more like a murmur, a low, private voice whispering across time, each passage penned by a different scribe over generations, each one sharing something deeply human and mostly forbidden. There's a section on the thrill of a forbidden glance in the temple gardens, another on the art of warming oil to just the right temperature before massaging it onto a lover's back. Not too hot or it becomes medicine, not too cold or it becomes memory. One line simply says, "She touched the back of my neck with 3 fingers. I forgot the names of every god." Beck chuckles softly. He's seen a lot, copied more, but something about this scroll always brings colour to his cheeks. Not because it's crude, because it's honest. One passage tells the story of a young man who spent an entire evening painting his eyelids with ground lapis just to impress a girl who never even looked up from her embroidery. Another describes a wife who, after 30 years of marriage, still tied a fresh blue ribbon around her waist every night, just in case her husband remembered to notice. And then there's the segment on dreams. Dreams of touching without touching, of hearing a lover's voice while standing in the middle of a crowd, of waking up and reaching for someone who wasn't there. The scroll doesn't mock these things, it honours them. Even the loneliness, even the ache. It acknowledges what we all carry, that not every desire is fulfilled and not every love ends in union. But all of it matters. All of it deserves a voice. Beck closes his eyes for a moment. He remembers the boy he once kissed beneath the columns of the western courtyard. It wasn't meant to happen. It was quick, clumsy, surprising, like biting into an overripe fig. sweet but dangerous. They never spoke again. But sometimes, when he reads this scroll, Beck feels that moment again. Not the kiss, but the breath before it. That electric stillness. The question that never needed answering. The scroll continues. If I could write her name in fire, I would burn gladly. His hands were like the Nile, steady and full of secrets. Some kisses are temples. Beck sighs, deep and warm. He looks up at the oil lamp, its flame shrinking with sleep. He knows he should put the scroll away, but instead he adds to it. With careful hands, he opens a blank piece of papyrus, dips his pen and writes, "She was the silence between the notes, and I loved her like a forgotten melody." He rolls it carefully, slides it into the scroll, and tucks the whole bundle back into the brick. Another layer added. Another story resting quietly in the shadows. And just like that, the scroll of unspoken things continues. So the next scribe who finds it 10 years from now, or 1,000, will hear not just one voice, but a chorus. A soft, eternal echo of desire, joy, memory, and loss, and love. Always love. Let's leave Beck now, hunched in the lamplight, heart still humming with what he's just written. Outside, the stars have arranged themselves into quiet constellations. Orion tilts westward. Sirius blinks low on the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, and then remembers the night is too beautiful for noise. And as we step away from that sacred chamber, let your mind drift toward a different kind of tale. One found not in scrolls or gardens or rooftops, but carved into stone, in the private quarters of a queen. Imagine it's late. So late that even the palace walls seem to be dreaming. The air is heavy with myrrh and garden jasmine drifting in from the courtyard. Somewhere far away, a lyre murmurs its final notes for the night, and at the very centre of it all, past columns of gold-veined limestone, past silent guards wrapped in linen and stillness, is a chamber more sacred than any throne room, the Queen's bedchamber. Tonight it belongs to a woman called Meritame. Not the most famous queen, not a Cleopatra or a Hatshepsut, but once she wore the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red of Lower Egypt. Once she had the ears of the priests and the eyes of the generals, and tonight, she just wants her pillow. You see, Meritame had a secret, not a lover, not a curse, a pillow. Not the ceremonial kind embroidered in lapis and covered in cartouches. Not the stiff headrests that so many used to preserve their coiffed wigs. No, this pillow was soft, worn in the middle, stuffed with goose down and faintly scented with lavender oil. She called it her little moon, and every night, no matter how grand the feast or tense the court meeting, she'd whisper to her attendants, "Bring me the moon." It always made her smile. Tonight her chamber is bathed in candlelight. Shadows dance on walls painted with blue lotuses and falcons mid-flight. The floor is cool alabaster, smooth beneath her feet. She's just had her bath, a long soak in warm water with powdered milk and honey, and her skin is glowing like polished copper. An attendant braids her hair slowly, humming an old lullaby. Another rubs scented oil into her feet. And Meritame, she's barely awake. Her eyelids flutter like moth wings. She wants to talk, but the day has been long. Too many treaties, too many questions, too many people saying, "Yes, great one," and when they really mean, "Please don't behead me." So she just breathes, slowly, letting the weight of her body sink into the cushions, letting the oil warm her skin and lull her into that place between waking and dreams. And then it arrives. Her pillow, the little moon. She clutches it like a child. Not because she's afraid, but because it's hers. It smells like sleep. It knows her shape. It's been with her through heartbreak and triumph, through weddings and funerals and all the strange days in between. She once took it on a diplomatic voyage down the Nile and refused to sleep without it. When it was nearly lost during a flood in Thebes, she wept more than she did when her third cousin died. And when a rival queen mockingly called it a peasant's sack, Meritame simply smiled and said, "That's how I know it works." Now, tucked into her bed under a sheer linen canopy, the queen finally lets herself be. Not a ruler, not a goddess incarnate, just a woman, listening to the hum of the night, the flicker of flame, the soft scuff of sandal on stone as her attendants retreat. Sometimes she dreams of childhood, of racing barefoot through date groves, hair unbound, teeth stained with pomegranate, of her mother's lap, warm and endless, of the moment she first saw a lotus bloom, so blue it hurt her eyes. Other times she dreams of the future, of daughters she hasn't had yet, of empires she'll never see, of her name being whispered by children in centuries she won't live to witness. But most nights like tonight she just sleeps. Wrapped in silence, her cheek pressed against her little moon, a soft smile on her lips, and the pillow, it never complains, never shifts. It just remembers the shape of her dreams and cradles her through them. Let me tell you something funny. Decades later, when Meritamen had passed into legend, when her golden burial mask was placed gently over her face, and the last hymns sung in her name, the tomb builders found her pillow, tucked behind her in the sarcophagus, wrapped in cloth like something sacred. At first they thought it was a mistake, that perhaps someone had left it there by accident. But no, it was written on a small tag hidden beneath the linen folds, "Let the Queen take her moon to the stars." Even now, in museums and texts, they don't mention it, but I like to think it's still there, somewhere in that dark, quiet tomb, keeping her head just slightly elevated as she continues dreaming across time. And maybe, just maybe, that's why sometimes, when the Nile is especially calm and the wind smells like lavender and old secrets, people say they see a faint crescent glowing above the riverbanks. A moon, small, soft, and perfectly shaped to fit a resting queen. Now, let's step away gently, leave Meritamen to her dreams. We've peered into her sacred space long enough, and as the night deepens, let your thoughts drift from royal chambers to something much more mischievous. A festival so wild even the gods blushed. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a city dreaming. It's Thebes, or maybe Memphis, anywhere the Nile curves like a lazy cat, and the temple bells chime in the distance like yawns. The sky is navy velvet, stitched with silver stars. The breeze smells like ripe dates and sweet fermenting figs. It's the kind of night that leans in close and whispers, anything can happen. And tonight, it does. Because once a year, the ancient Egyptians let go. I mean really let go. They danced, they drank, they laughed too loud. They confessed secrets and kissed strangers and sang old songs with no words. All in honor of one intoxicating deity. Hathor, goddess of love, joy, music, and the occasional wild decision. They called it the Festival of Drunkenness. But between us, some just called it Truth Night. The sun has barely slipped away when it begins. Fires light up the riverbanks. Musicians tune their instruments. Flutes, drums, something that sounds suspiciously like a cowbell. Torches flicker along alleyways and marketplaces. Even the statues seem to lean in, interested. In the temples, priests begin the rites. They pour golden beer into wide-mouthed jars, the scent floating thick in the air. They chant songs half-sung, half-slurred, odes to Hathor's beauty, her power, her fondness for fine things and even finer mischief. Let me take you to the center of it. A long table under fig trees, clay cups passed from hand to hand. Women with painted eyes and henna'd fingers giggle into their palms. A man with a harp sings a tune about a crocodile who fell in love with a goose. It shouldn't be funny, but it is. Maybe it's the wine. Or maybe it's the truth. You see, during this festival, the rules soften like butter in the sun. For one night only, you're encouraged to speak the things you normally swallow. Feelings, confessions, dreams, regrets, love. The people believed that Hathor's power opened a gateway in the heart, a little latch that let your real self peek out. And through the haze of music and mead, people would suddenly tell the truth. Sometimes too much. One scribe stands on a bench and declares he's in love with the baker's wife. The crowd gasps, then laughs, then cheers. The baker, thankfully, just pours another drink. A weaver whispers to her friend that she's tired of making linen and wants to become a dancer. Her friend grabs her hands and says, "Then dance." Two brothers, estranged for years, end up sobbing into each other's shoulders. "You stole my sandals," one mumbles. "They were nice sandals," the other says. Then they both start laughing again. It's chaos, but beautiful. In a world bound by ceremony and gods and scarabs carved with prayers, this night is a release valve, a place to breathe, to howl, to feel. And oh, the drinks. There's a honey beer so thick you can stand a spoon in it. Palm wine that tastes like it wants to start a fight. A fizzy pomegranate elixir that makes everyone sing louder. Each sip is both a toast to Hathor and a small surrender of the self. Even pharaohs weren't immune. There's a tale whispered like a rumour that one ruler, known for his solemn rule and fearsome judgments, once joined the festival in disguise. A linen cloak, some soot rubbed on the face, a cheeky wink. No one recognised him. That night he danced with a potter's daughter, ate grilled onions on flatbread, sang a dirty ballad about Anubis and a bad haircut. And when she asked him his name, he just said, "Call me Moonlight." Years later, she claimed that same moonlight passed laws protecting female artisans. Who knows? Maybe truth, like wine, has a way of lingering. The festival always ended the same way, at dawn. As the first streaks of sun kissed the temples, people would stumble home, shoes in hand, makeup smudged, voices hoarse, hearts slightly fuller. The priest would pour the final libations, thanking Hathor for her visit and promising to behave, mostly until next year. And somewhere, under the fig trees now quiet with dew, those same clay cups would sit, empty but echoing, as if they remembered. Let's stay just a moment longer. The embers are still glowing. A scarf lies forgotten on the grass. A harp string hums gently in the breeze like the memory of laughter. And then, silence. The kind that feels soft and satisfied. Like a secret you told that didn't ruin everything. Now, as the sun begins to rise over the Nile, let's drift away from the revelers and into the calm rhythm of everyday love. The slow, quiet devotion of ordinary couples. Let me take you somewhere softer. It's morning now, the hush after the festival. The sun stretches slowly across mud brick walls, warming clay floors and woven mats. Outside you hear the distant cry of a heron rising over the Nile. Inside, a woman hums as she folds linen. Not silk, not gold-threaded robes, just linen, plain, cream-coloured, worn smooth with use. The kind of fabric that touched nearly every Egyptian life. Breezy enough to handle the heat, simple enough to dye, and soft enough to swaddle a newborn or shroud the departed. But for her, this linen is more than cloth. It's memory. Her fingers trace the edge of the tunic her husband wore the day he first brought home pomegranates from the market, laughing about how he'd bartered using nothing but charm and 2 onions. She smooths the sleeves of the robe she stitched for their wedding, uneven, rushed, but wrapped around them both like a promise. In ancient Egypt, love wasn't always epic. It wasn't always carved into stone walls or sung by poets beneath balconies. Sometimes it was domestic. It lived in meals cooked with care, in sandals repaired without being asked, in the extra date tucked into someone's satchel before work. And yes, in linens, washed, folded, shared, and patched together over time like stories. And when words failed, they wrote. Tiny scraps of papyrus, bits of pottery shards, letters carved with reed pens full of heart. Did you know the Egyptians were prolific love writers? Even the most hardened scribe had a poem or 2 tucked away in a drawer. One such fragment, written by a man to his beloved, reads, "I am yours as bread belongs to the mouth. I am yours as scent to the flower." Isn't that lovely? Another line, scrawled clumsily but clearly, said, "Come to me in the breeze, my heart's sister." That was a term of endearment. Sister. Not because they were siblings, but because love in Egypt was often framed through kinship, familiarity, someone close, someone known, someone you could share silence with. In the small house we're visiting now, the woman finishes folding her linens and moves to a shelf where a tiny wooden box sits. She opens it slowly, revealing a worn piece of Ostrakhan, pottery used like paper. She smiles. It's a message from her husband, years old now. It says, "I saw a duck and thought of your walk. You have my heart in your toes." Silly, sweet, entirely human. Outside, her husband returns from the market, balancing a basket of lentils and leeks. He greets her with a gentle nod and a smirk that says, "Yes, I haggled again." She rolls her eyes. He hands her a single lotus flower. She places it into a cup of water on the windowsill. "Let me ask you something. Quietly, gently. When was the last time you noticed the way someone folds your shirt? Or the way they cut the crusts off your bread even if you never asked? That's ancient too. That's love with dust on it. Not grand, not gilded, but good." As the morning light brightens the small room, and the two of them share a date and a laugh, we begin to drift back. Back through time and space, through cobbled alleys and soft footsteps. And as we step outside, we hear a neighbour composing a song with his flute. A girl chasing her cat through the street. A baker waving to a butcher. Just life. Ordinary, sacred, soft. And now, as that soft hum of morning fades behind us, let your thoughts wander to something a little stranger, a little more mysterious. Because up next is a story about spells, scents, and a love potion that may or may not have worked. Close your eyes for a moment, softly now, and imagine the faint glow of an oil lamp flickering in a stone chamber. Its light dances on shelves of tiny clay jars, reed bundles and long-necked vials sealed with wax and linen thread. This is no apothecary for the sick. It's a perfumer's room, and tonight we slip into the world of ancient Egyptian fragrance, not just for elegance, but for seduction, for longing, for magic. The Egyptians believed scent had power, not just the power to charm, but to transform, to awaken the soul, stir the gods, and sometimes entice a hesitant heart. Let me tell you about Kai-Fi, a fragrant, resinous blend of such richness and mystery it was once thought to lull even pharaohs into sweeter dreams. It wasn't simply perfume, it was prayer-made liquid, cinnamon, myrrh, honey, frankincense, raisins soaked in wine. Picture it, an ancient recipe ground by moonlight and murmured over by priestesses, simmered slowly into thick, smoky incense, and they wore it too, men and women both. On their necks, their wrists, behind their ears, they even crafted wax cones infused with scented oils, worn atop the head during feasts and ceremonies. As the evening warmed, the cone would slowly melt, releasing its sweet perfume into their hair, their clothes, the air around them. Imagine being seated beside someone at a banquet, and over the course of an hour their scent blooms like an unfolding flower, slow, subtle, lingering. Tell me, have you ever caught a whiff of someone's cologne long after they've left the room, and suddenly remembered everything about them? That's old magic. In one love spell found scrawled on papyrus, a desperate man invokes the goddess Hathor. May her heart burn with longing. May her nostrils yearn for my scent. Now, we don't know if it worked. Maybe she caught a sniff of him and ran the other way. Or maybe she dreamed of him that night. It's hard to say. But what's clear is that Egyptians didn't just believe in attraction, they crafted it. Even the gods were enticed by smell. Temples were filled with incense daily. Offerings to the divine weren't always visual, they were olfactory. To please a deity, one had to smell good. And to summon love? Well, a little honeyed oil behind the ear couldn't hurt. There's a story from the reign of Ramses II about a noblewoman who was said to make her own perfume, mixing crushed lotus petals with almond oil and crushed date pits. It wasn't sold, only gifted, to lovers, to friends, to those she favoured. A traveller once wrote, "She wore no jewels, only scent." In a way, that might have been more powerful. Now let's step into a perfume chamber where a young woman, shy but determined, dips her fingers into a glassy vial. It's a gift from her mother, a blend passed down through the women of her family. She dabs it at her wrists. The smell is warm, spicy, like cloves and crushed rose. Tonight she's attending a gathering by the river. Not a royal event, just neighbours, music, shared dates and sweet wine. But she hopes he'll be there. He's the son of a fisherman, kind eyes, laughs with his whole chest. Once helped her carry a basket of figs without asking. She's not even sure he remembers. But tonight she'll sit beside him, maybe offer him a lotus blossom, and if her scent catches the breeze, perhaps the spell will stir. Not a spell of magic, not really, but of courage. of stepping into a moment softened by scent, lit by lamplight, alive with possibility. And you? Have you ever saved a perfume bottle long after it was empty, just to remember someone? Or dabbed a certain scent when you missed a place, a time, a version of yourself? The Egyptians would understand. They would smile knowingly. And now, as the breeze picks up and the candles burn low in that perfumer's chamber, we step out again, our thoughts trailing behind us like a ribbon of smoke. Next, let me take you to a place more clinical, but no less intimate, because ancient Egyptians were surprisingly frank about the body, and their medicine, well, it tells us far more than just how they healed. Now, my friend, lie back just a bit more comfortably. Let your arms rest at your sides, and picture, if you will, a physician in ancient Thebes, robes of linen, a reed pen tucked behind one ear, and shelves of papyrus scrolls stacked neatly in rows. This doctor doesn't use stethoscopes, no plastic gloves, no blinking machines. Instead, there's a doll, a figurine really, clay or ivory, delicately shaped into the form of a woman, used not as a toy, but as a tool, a way to show, to explain, to understand the parts of the body that were, well, difficult to describe in public. And this doll, it might have helped explain everything from fertility to fevers to certain private concerns that blush even the oldest papyrus pages. You see, ancient Egyptian medicine was surprisingly advanced and surprisingly open. The Ebers papyrus, dating to around 1550 BCE, contains hundreds of remedies, and many of them relate to love, longing, and the very human experience of intimacy. There were instructions for birth control, concoctions made from crocodile dung or acacia gum. Some were herbal pessaries, others, well, less appetizing. Let's just say it's no wonder the gods invented perfume first. One passage reads, "To prevent conception for 1 year, mix honey with natron salt and insert it as a pessary." That was over 3,000 years ago, and while the science might be questionable, the effort, admirable. But medicine wasn't just about preventing, it was also about encouraging. Fertility, after all, was sacred, and love, a divine gift. Imagine walking into a healer's chamber, seated on a mat. They smile and ask gently, "Does your heart ache or your womb?" And you explain, carefully, haltingly, that you and your partner have longed for a child. The doctor nods, reaches for a scroll, and begins to whisper prayers to Hathor, goddess of love and motherhood. They mix a potion, dates, carob, herbs ground into wine. A small amulet is placed into your palm, an image of Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess who protected women in childbirth. She's round, fearsome, maternal, and somehow comforting. Sometimes doctors would place a barley seed in a woman's urine to determine pregnancy. If the barley sprouted, it was said to confirm it. You can imagine how patiently some waited, eyes fixed on that little patch of grain, holding breath, hoping, praying. They didn't separate medicine from magic. They didn't separate body from soul. Healing was a full, sacred circle. And perhaps in a way we still long for that today. For doctors who listen, for remedies laced with meaning, for spaces where it's okay to say something feels off without shame. Let me tell you one more thing. Among the most touching finds in medical papyri are the little notes written in the margins, perhaps scribbled by students or healers unsure. Little additions that say things like, "Repeat 3 times, whisper softly, do not frighten the patient." Doesn't that feel tender? As if even then they knew that tone matters. That healing begins with kindness. So picture that clay doll again, smooth, worn, held many times. Maybe one young healer handed it to a nervous woman, pointed gently and said, "Here, let me show you. You are not alone." And now, as the candle flickers low in that healer's hut and the desert wind hums against the reed walls, we'll move on, from medicine to music. Because next we'll explore how ancient melodies stirred the heart, and sometimes even tempted the gods. Let your eyes grow heavier now, and listen closely. Can you hear it? The soft pluck of a harp string, the hush of a wooden flute, the slow rhythmic clap of hands keeping time with a pulse older than words. Tonight we drift into a world where music didn't just entertain, it stirred the soul, swayed lovers, and sometimes summoned the divine. In ancient Egypt, music was everywhere. In temples it called to the gods. In homes it soothed sleeping children, and in the warm hush of moonlit gardens it spoke the language of longing between two hearts. Let me tell you about the sistrum, a rattle-like instrument shaped almost like a horseshoe. When shaken, it made a soft chiming sound said to please Hathor herself. Hathor, the goddess of love, dance and music. She was often shown with a sistrum in hand, smiling, swaying, watching over romantic entanglements with a knowing eye. Some believed that playing music in her honour could attract her favour, and perhaps encourage certain feelings to blossom. Picture this, a shaded courtyard at dusk. Vines curl around sandstone columns. The scent of lotus flowers is thick in the air. A woman reclines on a cushion, her fingers brushing the strings of a harp with the same tenderness she might show a lover's arm. The song is slow, intimate, wordless, but its meaning is clear. Music could be flirtation, a language beyond speaking. Just one verse of a love song could say more than a scroll full of poetry. In fact, they did write love songs, dozens of them, inked carefully on papyri found buried with the dead. One fragment reads, "I pass by a house, my heart stumbles, my arms forget how to swing, my legs forget how to walk." Have you ever had that feeling? The kind where a single glance, a single note of a song makes your whole chest go quiet? The Egyptians captured that, in song, in sigh, in silence. Even men and women of the court had musicians and dancers trained not just in technique, but in subtlety. There was elegance in restraint, a raised eyebrow, a slow turn of the wrist. There's a fresco from a Theban tomb. Two women play lutes while another claps and sings. Their eyes half-lidded, their bodies relaxed but poised. One leans ever so slightly toward a nobleman seated beside her. You can almost hear the music, almost feel the warmth rising between them. Now, not all music was so delicate. At harvest festivals or beer-soaked banquets, rhythm became riotous. Drums, hand claps, ankle bells, songs with lyrics both sweet and suggestive. There's one temple hymn that celebrates the god Min, protector of fertility, with, shall we say, enthusiastic detail. And people danced. Not ballroom, not ballet. Think hips, think shoulders, think joy in the bones. There's a relief of a dancer mid-motion, her hair flying, her dress caught in swirl. She's not performing, she's becoming the music. You see, to the ancient Egyptians, music could excite the body, or soothe it into sleep. It could heat the blood or cool a restless mind. It was medicine. It was mood. It was magic. Even now, doesn't a certain song transport you to a moment, a summer night, a person you once loved? It hasn't changed much. The notes are different. The instruments evolved. But the feeling, the spark behind the ribcage? Still the same. Now, as the harp's last note fades into the star-speckled sky and the garden grows quiet again, let's step away from song and into something more tactile. Silk, linen and lace? Not quite. But in ancient Egypt, clothing was never just functional. It was flirtation, decoration, declaration. Let's slip into something soft, shall we? Just rest your head a little deeper into the pillow. Let the world dim around you, like an oil lamp flickering low. Now imagine, it's early evening in Memphis, the capital of ancient Egypt. The Nile winds lazily past the city walls, carrying the scent of water lilies. And somewhere behind a carved wooden screen, a young noble is getting dressed. Or perhaps undressed. Because in this world, fabric doesn't hide, it reveals. You might be surprised to know that most Egyptians wore linen, not just because it was light and breathable in the desert heat, but because it could be woven just sheer enough to suggest everything. The finest linen, called royal weave, was so thin it practically shimmered in sunlight. And though modesty had its place, it wasn't exactly the rigid kind we might imagine. A tunic slipping off one shoulder, a sash tied just a little loosely around the waist. These were choices. These were signals. And sometimes, less was more. Let's picture a woman preparing for a festival. She starts with perfumed oil rubbed slowly into her arms, her collarbone, her thighs. Not in a rush. Not just for scent, but for glow. A way to soften the skin until it shines like polished alabaster. Then comes the kohl. With a small stick, she traces thick black lines around her eyes, elongating them, exaggerating every glance. You might know it as eyeliner. They knew it as protection, from sun glare, from evil spirits, from missing a romantic opportunity. It served many purposes. Kohl was often mixed with malachite, yes, real green stone ground into powder, and applied in bold streaks across the lid. Not just stylish, but believed to invite the favour of Hathor, the goddess of beauty. And lips, red ochre, applied with care. Not quite lipstick, but not far off. Now for jewellery. Imagine golden collars, heavy and cool against the chest. Beaded necklaces with lapis and turquoise glinting in torchlight. Rings on fingers, anklets with tiny bells. Each step, a shimmer and a sound. In a society where most clothing was simple, accessories spoke volumes. A wide girdle belt might mean flirtation, a lotus blossom tucked behind the ear, romance in bloom. And let's not forget wigs. Yes, men and women both wore them. Not out of vanity, but as ritual. Hair was sacred, but also shaved for hygiene. So wigs, ornate, curled, perfumed, became not just fashionable, but intimate. A lover removing your wig at night? That was trust. That was closeness. There are scrolls and inscriptions that describe lovers preparing for each other, not just with dress, but with intention, selecting their best linen, painting their nails red with henna, dabbing a bit of myrrh behind each ear. Some scholars believe perfumes were layered, not unlike music, a base of frankincense, a hint of lotus oil, a final touch of cinnamon bark, worn not just to smell nice, but to be remembered. It said Cleopatra had her own signature scent, a mix so potent that ships could smell her arrival before her sails were seen. Now, whether that's poetic or literal, who's to say? But the idea that one could wear memory like a fragrance, that lingers. And for those with fewer coins in their pouch, beauty wasn't lost. Simpler linen, clay beads, coal made from soot. Even the humblest vendor in the marketplace might paint their mouth, powder their cheeks, or twist a ribbon into their braid. Because beauty wasn't just vanity, it was connection, celebration, a way to say, here I am, look a little closer. Now, as the perfumed air settles and the last bracelet is fastened, we leave the dressing chamber behind. But we won't go far, because just beyond those linen-draped doorways lies something more mysterious, and far more enchanting. A temple, a veil of incense, and a ritual you might not expect. Let's go there next. It's night again in ancient Egypt, but this time we're not in a palace or private courtyard. We're in a temple. The sandstone walls are tall and smooth, etched with delicate hieroglyphs that whisper stories older than memory. Torches flicker in heavy sconces. The air is warm, scented with myrrh and burning juniper, and beneath the hush of silence, there's something else. A kind of humming, a pulse. Because here, in this sacred place, sensuality and spirituality are not opposites. They are one. Many of Egypt's temples were more than houses of worship. They were living, breathing theatres of divine ritual, and some of those rituals were surprisingly intimate. Take Hathor's temple at Dendera. By day, a place of healing and devotion, but by night, especially during festivals, it could become something else entirely. A space where music, dance, perfume, and wine mixed under the gaze of the goddess of love. Priestesses of Hathor weren't simply keepers of prayer. They were musicians, dancers, dream weavers, chosen for their beauty, their voices, their grace. Not unlike ancient geishas, they offered something more than ceremony, something deeply human. There are hints in temple reliefs, figures swaying with sistrums in their hands, lotus blossoms between their fingers, eyes cast downward in gentle suggestion. Some believe they performed ritual dances meant to invoke fertility and sensual pleasure, not in a vulgar way, but in a way that mirrored the life-giving power of the divine feminine. Even the gods themselves were involved. Myth tells us that the great god Amun, during one particular New Year's festival, journeyed by boat from his temple at Karnak to that of Mut, his consort. It wasn't just a procession, it was a divine reunion, one that celebrated love, union, and the rekindling of creation. The high priest reenacted this reunion with solemn beauty. The joining of Amun and Mut was more than symbolic. It echoed the natural cycles of rebirth, harvest, fertility, and yes, desire. Sex in this context wasn't hidden. It was honored, blessed, essential. Even temple architecture reflected this balance. Columns carved to resemble papyrus stalks, symbols of growth and fertility. Ceilings painted deep blue with stars, suggesting the womb of Nut, the sky goddess cradling the cosmos. Imagine being there. Late at night, the temple quiet but for the soft beat of a hand drum, oil lamps flickering along the carved corridor, the scent of lotus thick in the air. A woman, perhaps a priestess, moves slowly across the polished floor, her silhouette weaving through shadow and flame. Every step is measured, every glance deliberate. She isn't performing for the crowd. She's invoking something ancient, something tender, something powerful. There's a softness in the way the Egyptians held these rituals, a reverence for the body, not as temptation, but as temple. Even the love poems found in tombs hint at this divine connection. One lover writes to another, "Your love is mixed into my limbs like perfume into oil." Now, was every ritual sensual? Certainly not. But the boundary between sacred and sensual in ancient Egypt was never harsh. It was a woven cloth, not a stone wall. To feel pleasure was to echo the gods, to love, to touch, to yearn. These were not sins, but signs of life. As we leave the temple now, quietly, respectfully, you might feel something linger on your skin, a warmth, a memory of something unspoken. But don't worry, our next step is softer still, because what comes after devotion? Rest, repose, and the secrets of the ancient Egyptian bedchamber. Let's pull back the curtain gently. The doorway creaks softly as we step inside. Not a palace hall this time, not even a temple, just a bedroom, simple and still. A cool breeze slips through the carved wooden window slats, carrying the hush of nighttime along the Nile. Somewhere far off, a reed flute plays the same 4 notes over and over, like a memory that refuses to fade. The bed is raised, slightly off the ground, woven from reeds or leather straps, pulled tight like a loom. It's nothing like the cloud-soft mattresses we know today, but it was enough. For some, it was all they needed. A cushion of linen at the head, a carved headrest cradling the skull, curved like a smile. And this is where the ba returns. Not the body, the ba. Let me explain. In ancient Egyptian belief, each person had a ka, your life force, and a ba, your soul's personality, often imagined as a bird with your face. The ba would leave the body at night while you slept, flying through dreams, visiting familiar places or the afterlife. And then at dawn, it would return. So sleep wasn't just rest. It was a reunion, a sacred flight, and the bedroom, a portal. But back to the earthly side of things. Couples slept side by side if they had room. Wealthier homes might have a private room set aside for the master and mistress of the house. Others simply shared open space, separating themselves with hanging linen or quiet routine. Sometimes, sleep wasn't just for sleep. There are medical papyri that describe aphrodisiacs, fertility spells, and yes, love potions. One text recommends grinding dates with carob and honey into a thick paste and eating it before bed to stir desire. Another suggests certain amulets placed under the pillow to encourage dreams of one's beloved. Imagine lying there, in the heavy silence of night, waiting for a dream to bring someone to you. And what of comfort? They had their own versions, scented oils massaged into tired limbs, a soft linen tunic, cool and clean from the river wash. Even mosquito nets, woven with astonishing care, hung from wooden frames to protect sleepers from the buzzing night. Some inscribed charms on their bed frames, tiny prayers scratched into wood grain, asking the gods for peaceful rest. Others placed faience beads or tiny ivory figurines beneath the pillow, especially children, to guard against nightmares and night spirits. And lovers? Well, ancient Egyptian love poetry is among the most tender and sensual in the world. One verse reads, "I lie down beside you and my arms are around you, like the embrace of the Nile in the land." Another, "I want to be the laundryman of my beloved, so I may touch her linen and wash away her sweat." There's a warmth in these lines, not just passion, but playfulness, familiarity. Even the act of sleep was wrapped in care. You see, in ancient Egypt, love wasn't just action, it was presence, staying, returning, holding space while someone's bar wandered far and returned in the morning. Now, as the breeze continues to lift the edges of the curtain and the oil lamp flickers lower, let your own mind drift. Picture yourself there, the Nile just beyond your window, a clay pot of cool water near your bed, and beside you a simple wooden amulet carved in the shape of a lotus, offering safety, love, and maybe, just maybe, a dream worth remembering. But don't rise yet. There's still more to see, more to remember. Because while night holds secrets, morning brings mystery too, especially when it begins in the garden. The door opens with a soft sigh, and there, just beyond the threshold, is a garden. Not a garden in the way we often imagine, a rectangle of flowers behind a house. This one is different, older, enclosed by high mud brick walls, its paths lined with polished limestone and shaded by palms and sycamores. There's a central pool shaped like a rectangle full of lotus and papyrus, where frogs hum their sleepy songs and dragonflies skim the water like tiny gods of flight. It's morning in ancient Egypt, and this garden, you might say, is where the soul begins its day. These household gardens, found in both royal estates and modest homes, were not just for beauty. They were places of intimacy, of flirtation, of healing, of soft, slow breakfasts and careful conversations, and sometimes of secret rendezvous. Imagine the scene. You step barefoot onto the smooth stone path, warm already from the rising sun. A fig tree bends low near the edge of the water, and you pluck one lazily, biting into its honeyed flesh. Sweet and soft, little sticky on your fingers. Somewhere a servant pours water into a small clay basin for hand washing, and you catch the scent of blue lotus in the breeze. This isn't just leisure, it's a ritual. Because in the early hours, the garden was where hearts could speak. Ancient Egyptian love songs, those found on papyri and shards of pottery, often take place in gardens. One lover writes, "I waited for you by the pond under the sycamore. My heart swam like a fish in your shadow." Another teases, "My love is in the garden. If I go and find her there, what fruit shall I taste, fig or kiss?" There's something universal in it, isn't there? The garden is a place where the body rests, but the heart races. Here's a quiet little fact for you. Flowers in ancient Egypt weren't just decorations. They were messages. A lotus bud might say desire. A garland of mandrake. That was an open invitation. Freshly plucked poppy, well, that was sometimes left behind after a secret meeting like a perfumed calling card. Even in royal gardens, meticulously maintained with water channels and fruit orchards, moments of privacy were carved out. We know this from letters. A noblewoman once wrote to her lover, "Meet me where the pomegranate splits open in the sun." Can you see it? The blush of fruit, the gleam of juice on the skin, the way something ordinary becomes a secret signal. Even married couples found time to reconnect in the garden. Some shared early meals there. Flatbread, beer, maybe dates or roasted lentils, before the day's duties began. Children might still be asleep, servants silent. Just the chirp of hoopoe birds, the trickle of water, and the slow dance of palm leaves against the sky. And beneath it all, the hum of something timeless. Because the garden was not just a place, it was a threshold between sleep and wake, between thought and feeling, between the world's noise and the heart's murmur. As the sun climbs higher now, let's leave this garden with care. You've had your fig, washed your hands, perhaps even smiled at someone across the pool without saying a word. Let that feeling linger, because beyond the garden is the bathhouse. And what unfolds there is not just cleansing, it's transformation. The first thing you notice is the hush. A bathhouse in ancient Egypt isn't crowded or loud. It's not Roman or Turkish in its grandeur. Instead, it's intimate, local, a humble place of clay walls and smooth plaster, dim with filtered light. A space meant not just to clean the body, but to prepare the soul. You duck slightly as you enter. The air is warm, not scalding. There's the scent of herbs, mint, coriander, maybe a trace of chamomile drifting on the steam. The floors are slightly damp, made from stone or tamped earth, smoothed by countless feet. Here, bathing was never rushed. It began with stillness. Imagine sitting on a low stool, a servant or loved one gently pouring water from a clay jug onto your shoulders. It runs down in warm streams, like being wrapped in melted gold. No soap, not yet, just water. Soft, steady, calming. And then the cleansing begins. They used a paste, something gritty made of natron salts or crushed limestone mixed with oil, rubbed over the skin to exfoliate. Not harsh, just enough to make you feel reborn. Sometimes they'd add perfumed ingredients, cinnamon, frankincense, ground lotus petals, turning this act of washing into something holy. Even royalty followed these rituals. There's a surviving inscription in a tomb painting of Queen Ti's attendants, gently washing her feet in a private chamber, their hands painted in delicate, reverent gestures, and beside them, a tray of perfumes, unguents, and oils, all stored in tiny alabaster jars, each carved to catch the light. But let's pause for a moment. Can you feel it? The sensation of warm water trickling down your spine, the soft rhythm of hands scrubbing your arms, the slow, deliberate movements, almost meditative, every muscle letting go, every thought drifting into silence. Now comes the oil, scented, of course. Egyptians adored fragrance. They believed it wasn't just for the body, it pleased the gods. Even temples were anointed with perfumed wax. Myrrh, sandalwood, and blue lotus were favourites, blended into rich balms that melted into the skin like butter on warm bread. And for couples, bathing together was not taboo. In fact, it was cherished. Some love poems speak of washing one another's backs, of massaging fragrant oils into sun-warmed skin, of lingering, not out of necessity, but devotion. One line reads, "She anoints me in the morning, her hands like cool water. I am a jar she fills with joy." You smile, don't you? That same feeling lingers even now. And it wasn't just about physical cleansing. In Egyptian belief, scent had power. Fragrance could protect you, lift your spirit, even guide your car after death. Some amulets were infused with scent. Others were shaped like perfume bottles themselves, tiny vessels meant to carry comfort into the afterlife. And when you left the bathhouse, you emerged not just clean but softened, clothed in freshly laundered linen, limbs oiled and shining in the morning light, maybe with a dab of incense behind your ear, maybe with the taste of something sweet still on your tongue. You felt lighter, brighter, as though you could face the day not just awake but renewed. And now that you've been bathed, perfumed, and wrapped in silence, let's step into the rhythms of daily life. Because in ancient Egypt, intimacy didn't vanish with sunrise. Sometimes it was baked into bread. Bread, that most ordinary of things, yes? But in ancient Egypt, bread wasn't just food. It was love. It was ritual. It was flirtation, comfort, and inheritance, sometimes all at once. Let me paint the morning for you. A woman, maybe a wife, maybe a mother, maybe someone waiting for a letter that never comes, kneels beside a wide ceramic bowl. Her hands disappear into a mound of dough, sticky and golden with emmer wheat. She hums to herself. The room smells of yeast and flour and wood smoke. A cat curls beneath the bench, tail flicking lazily. She's not just making bread, she's remembering someone, or thinking of someone. Or maybe she's shaping the dough just so, because she knows her husband likes it that way. Round, with a little curl at the edge. In some homes, bread was baked with dried dates or stuffed with bits of onion and coriander, savoury and sweet in the same bite. Lovers exchanged loaves as gifts. Parents left them at the feet of statues, offerings for safe childbirth or healing. Even tombs were stocked with bread, hundreds of loaves carved in stone or moulded in wax, just in case the soul got hungry on the long journey west. Imagine biting into one now. The crust crackles just a little. The centre is dense, warm and earthy. You taste the wheat, the hint of date syrup, and maybe just the faintest crunch of sesame. It sticks slightly to your teeth, then melts away. But it wasn't just about the bread itself. It was what it meant. When a young couple fell in love, say two artisans who worked near the Nile, they might not be able to exchange golden jewellery, but they could trade small things, a comb, a scarf, or a special loaf of bread. There's a line from a love song scratched in faded ink on a piece of pottery. She brought me bread from her home, I kept the crumbs in my robe and thought of her all day. Do you feel that? That softness? Even crumbs meant something, and where there was bread, there was honey. Real Egyptian honey, thick, golden, collected from hives shaped like clay tubes laid horizontally under woven shade. Beekeepers wore little protection. They calmed the bees with smoke and prayer, then scooped the honey slowly, letting it drip into jars shaped like teardrops. Honey wasn't just a sweetener. It was medicine. It was magic. It was used in love spells and healing ointments, in cosmetics and aphrodisiacs. One spell says, place honey and beer in your mouth, then speak the name of the one you desire. Their heart will soften. Simple, isn't it? And maybe it worked, because love doesn't always need a parade. Sometimes it just needs something warm from the oven. A soft corner torn off and handed silently. A taste of honey. A glance that says, I remembered you this morning. Even in palaces this language held. There's a letter from a scribe to his beloved left behind on papyrus. I send you 2 loaves and a small jar. I press the honey myself. Do not share it. You smile. It's playful, familiar, like something you've read in a text message. Thousands of years ago, and still the same. And when evening came, some couples would sit by the fire and share what was left of the day's bread. The crusty edges, the broken halves. They dipped it in oil or honey, they talked, or didn't. And that was love too. Not grand, not loud, just steady, shared. Like a warm loaf passed from one pair of hands to another. So, as the shadows stretch longer on those quiet earthen floors, let's rise now. Let's step back outside, full, nourished, little sticky from honey, little lighter from the sweetness of it all. 'Cause next, we're going somewhere stranger. To a place where magic hums in the dust and love gets tangled in the stars. Close your eyes. Imagine you're standing beneath an open sky as dark and wide as forever. Stars flicker like pinholes in velvet, and the air smells faintly of myrrh, ash, and the Nile's breath. You're not alone out here. Not really. In ancient Egypt, love wasn't left to chance. It could be asked for, conjured even. Let me show you how. Somewhere, in a humble house near Thebes, a young woman, maybe she's 16, maybe 20, kneels beside a low table. In her hand she holds a reed pen and a scrap of linen. The room is candlelit. On the table is a little bowl of red ochre mixed with wine. She's writing a spell, not a grand fire and lightning kind of spell. No thunder, no glowing eyes, just a quiet request to the universe. Bring his heart to me like a goose on a leash. May he thirst for me like a traveller in the desert. And then she wraps the linen around a small clay figurine, maybe shaped like her beloved, maybe not. She tucks it beneath her mattress and waits. What do you think happened? Did it work? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But what mattered was trying. Taking that small moment of hope and turning it into something physical. That was Egyptian magic. It was soft, intimate, domestic. Not wizards in towers, but women and men sitting at kitchen tables mixing dates and prayers, whispering the name of someone they couldn't stop thinking about. And it wasn't always about romance. There were spells for keeping a lover faithful, spells for forgetting an ex, spells for healing a broken heart, or for conceiving a child with the one you loved most in the world. One charm involved placing a charm under your tongue before kissing the person you desired. The idea that your words and lips would carry the magic. And if that sounds silly, well, have you never carried someone's name in your pocket? Or kissed a photograph goodnight? Magic, it seems, doesn't really go out of style. Now let's lift our gaze higher, beyond rooftops, beyond mountains, to the constellations. The Egyptians believed the stars told stories, and among those stories were affairs. The goddess Nut arched across the sky each night, her body forming the heavens. Beneath her lay Geb, the earth god, her eternal lover. But they were cursed to remain apart, separated by their father, Shu, the god of air. Each night Nut swallowed the sun. Each morning she gave birth to it again. She did this while yearning for Geb, touching him only with moonlight and dew. Doesn't that feel familiar? A love you can't reach, but feel anyway. Priests and astrologers watched the stars not just to predict floods, but to read the moods of the gods and of love itself. They believed Venus, known to them as the star of the morning, was sacred to Hathor, the goddess of music, beauty, and romantic ecstasy. When Venus rose bright in the morning sky, couples might feel more tender, more bold, more ready. Imagine looking up at the sky before a date, or before slipping into bed with someone, and thinking, "Ah, Hathor is watching tonight." It adds a certain shimmer to things, doesn't it? And speaking of beds, yes, the Egyptians had spells for that too, not dirty, not crass, just honest, human, whispered under breath, or carved quietly onto amulets. Desires spoken aloud, then hidden beneath pillows or tucked into sandals. One spell reads, "Make me sweet as honey to him. Let his body seek mine as the lotus seeks the sun." Another simply says, "Let us sleep in laughter and wake as one." You can feel it, can't you? Not just the words, but the longing in them, the trust that the universe might be listening. And whether it was or not, people felt better after. Isn't that a kind of magic too? So now, as the stars press softly overhead and the night wraps around you like a linen sheet, let's take one more slow breath. In, out. The candles are low, the spell is written. The one you love, past, present, or not yet met, feels a little closer. And now, we'll leave the night sky behind, because dawn is coming, and with it, marriage, mischief, and what it really meant to be someone's partner, day after long, dusty day. Marriage in ancient Egypt wasn't sealed with "I do." No white dresses, no wedding cakes. Though if there were, I'm sure they'd be fig-filled and honey-glazed. Instead, a marriage began when two people simply decided. Let me paint the moment. Imagine a man, let's call him Keti, and a woman, Merit. They've known each other since they were children. He saw her carrying water at the river once, and she laughed when he slipped in the mud. That kind of memory lingers, doesn't it? Years pass, they grow. One day, Keti walks to her house with a basket of offerings, dates, bread, a little beer perhaps, and he presents them to her father. That's it. That's the proposal. No down on one knee moment. No diamond ring. Just bread, sincerity, and intention. And when the father agrees, and if Merit agrees too, the couple is married in the eyes of the community. They move in together. Maybe she brings a few amulets from her mother's house. Maybe he brings a stool carved by his grandfather. The house is small, adobe walls, a roof made from palm logs. Inside, a shared mat, a few clay jars, a grinding stone for wheat. It's not much, but it's theirs. Love in ancient Egypt wasn't always epic or poetic, but it was very real. Husbands and wives worked side by side. She might bake the bread, he might fetch water, or maybe she sold herbs in the market while he stayed home to watch their children. Roles shifted, laughed over, lived in. And if they quarrelled? Oh, they did. One poem, found scratched on the wall of a worker's home in Deir el Medina, reads, "She will not speak to me. She throws sand at the door when I pass." You can almost hear the sigh behind it, can't you? Marriage then, as now, had its moods. Some days warm as sun-baked bricks, others cold as Nile silt in winter. But despite the occasional shouting match or icy silence, the Egyptians believed in love. There are records of couples who stayed together for decades, long after the first blush of desire had settled into the rhythm of ordinary life. And their writings, oh, their writings, are sweet in a way that still melts today. One husband wrote of his wife, "She walks like a goddess. My heart follows her, even when my feet do not." It's the ancient Egyptian version of sending a heart emoji at 2 a.m. Now you might wonder, what about ceremonies? Well, there were feasts, yes, music, dancers, lots of wine, maybe even a bit too much wine. After all, Hathor, the goddess of love, was also the goddess of drunken joy. But there was no state-issued marriage certificate. No priest had to wave incense over the couple. Marriage was social, lived, chosen. There were marriage contracts eventually, especially for the wealthy. They spelled out things like property rights, dowries, and what would happen if the couple split up. One contract from 650 BCE promises, if the man divorces her, he shall give her 1.5 deben of silver. That's like saying, if this goes south, I'll at least cover your rent for a while. Fair, right? And divorce was allowed, for both men and women. There were no harsh penalties, no public shame. If things didn't work out, people parted, and sometimes they tried again with someone new. No judgment, just life. But there were also couples who stayed together through it all. The archaeological village of Deir el-Medina gives us glimpses of husbands who carved love notes into tomb walls, wives who left flowers in their husbands' burial chambers decades after death. Because love wasn't just for the living. In fact, many tombs feature images of the couple seated side by side, facing eternity together, still holding hands, still partners. Now, imagine this. Merit, our bride, has just moved into Keti's house. On their first night, they sit together on the roof, the Nile sparkling in the distance. She offers him a date soaked in honey. He laughs, calls her his lotus. No fireworks, just the soft hum of crickets and the slow brushing of palms in the wind. That's love. Quiet, tired, warm, real. And as night falls on their first shared evening and the oil lamp flickers low, they curl against each other, content, whole. And perhaps they whisper a little prayer to Hathor. Let this home know laughter. Let our days be long. Let our sleep be sweet. Now, as we gently leave that rooftop behind, let your breath slow. In, out. And as you drift into the quiet of their shared dreams, we'll move next to a topic equally intimate and surprisingly spicy. What really went on behind bedroom doors? Time to dim the lanterns just a little more. There's a misconception that the ancient world was shy about intimacy, that ancient Egyptians tiptoed around the topic of sex, avoiding it like a nervous schoolchild might avoid eye contact with their teacher, but let me assure you, they did not. In fact, they embraced sensuality like a favourite poem, often, playfully, and without apology. Let me take you into a private chamber, just past the columned courtyard of a modest home in Thebes. It's dusk. The stone floors are still warm from the sun, and inside, our fictional couple, perhaps Merit and Keti again, are preparing for a quiet night. Merit takes out a small alabaster jar filled with scented oil, lotus, frankincense, and a hint of cinnamon. She dabs it on her wrists, her neck, the soft dip behind her ears, not for a crowd, not even for Keti, just for herself and the slow exhale of the evening. And then, maybe a game, a teasing comment, a shared glance across the low flame of the oil lamp. Because in Egypt, sexuality wasn't just biology, it was sacred, celebratory, and often delightfully cheeky. The gods themselves were no strangers to desire. Myths speak of Isis and Osiris, whose love was so powerful it defied death. After Osiris was murdered and dismembered, Isis famously reassembled his body, and yes, that included crafting a new phallus from gold. If that's not devotion, what is? And then there's Min, the ancient Egyptian god of fertility. You'll find statues of him standing proud, let's say, fully inspired. He was honoured with public festivals where women and men alike would sing ribald songs, shake sistrums, and eat large, suggestively shaped vegetables. Yes, cucumbers made appearances. History is nothing if not creatively accurate. Now, back in our chamber, Merit might reach for a love potion. These weren't fairy tale brews, but real mixtures. Sometimes honey blended with dates, sometimes powdered mandrake root, believed to spark attraction, or passion, or maybe just courage. And Keti, he might wear a protective amulet shaped like a frog or an ankh, to ensure his virility stayed strong. Because performance anxiety, it turns out, is older than the pyramids. There's a scroll, papyrus, ancient and fragile, that details a spell spoken before lovemaking. It calls upon Hathor, the goddess of pleasure and music, asking her to bless the night with joy and moisten the heart with laughter. Beautiful, isn't it? And the bedroom itself, it wasn't draped in velvet or piled with pillows, often just a mat softened with linen sheets and maybe a blanket woven from reeds. But those sheets, frequently perfumed. One love poem says, "Come to me on beds of myrrh, and let the scent lead us to sleep." Sigh, you can almost smell it. There are records too of erotic imagery, on pottery and paintings, even scribbled graffiti at workers' villages. Not obscene, but earthy, funny, familiar. One little drawing on the wall of a tomb shows a couple in a rather inventive pose, accompanied by a caption that simply reads, "Don't try this on a full stomach." They had humour. They had desire, And most of all, they had no shame in either. But let's not mistake their openness for wild abandon. Sex was also layered with symbolism. It connected to fertility, family, the harvest, even the afterlife. Some tombs show couples embracing in the next world, still joined, still complete. Because for the Egyptians, a good life meant good love, in all its forms, gentle, passionate, spiritual, and yes, physical. As Merit and Keti now drift off to sleep in their perfumed sheets, limbs tangled, hearts slowed, we quietly leave their chamber. Let's tiptoe out. The room darkens behind us. The stars return overhead. And now, let's descend a little deeper into the world of love magic, sacred potions, and those irresistible amulets that promise to win hearts and sway moods. Let's begin with a whisper. Not mine, but one spoken 3,000 years ago, in the dark corner of a temple courtyard. A young girl sits alone, fingering a scrap of linen soaked in rose oil. She murmurs a spell, not loud, not bold, but soft, intentional. She speaks the name of a boy she loves, then folds the cloth, tucks it into a jar of honey and seals it with wax. Love magic. In ancient Egypt, love wasn't left to chance. If your heart ached or your lover strayed, you had options. Spells, rituals, little enchantments whispered beneath your breath or carried in your sleeve. It was common, natural, almost expected. And it started with the gods. Hathor, goddess of beauty, love and intoxication, was the patron of all things sweet and seductive. Women wore amulets carved with her face, hoping to draw affection. Men sang her praises with tambourines, hoping to be noticed. There were also lesser-known deities of desire. Bees, the lion-faced dwarf god who protected the bedroom. Taweret, the hippo goddess of fertility, each invoked, thanked or bargained with when love's path became tangled. But now, let's slip into the world of the everyday. You're standing in the dusty workshop of a village scribe. Shelves of herbs line the walls, cinnamon bark, dried mandrake, poppy heads. Scrolls rustle softly with spells handwritten in ink the colour of dried blood. A woman enters. Her eyes are fierce, determined. Her lover's gone cold. Her man, once so attentive, is now aloof, distant. She pays the scribe a small fee. He pulls out a piece of papyrus and begins to write. It might go like this. I conjure you, O spirit of flame, to enter the heart of Par-Happy. Let his thoughts burn for me. Let his dreams be filled with my name. May he thirst for my presence like the dry earth thirsts for the flood. She takes the spell home, lights a lamp, reads it aloud 3 times, then buries it under her lover's doorway. Magic done. Was it real? To her, it didn't matter. The act itself brought comfort, power, a sense that she had done something in a world where women had few levers to pull. But magic wasn't always sweet. Sometimes it was desperate. There are surviving binding spells, used to freeze a rival's heart or sour a potential match. Clay figurines would be moulded and broken, nails driven through little wax hearts, a plea to the gods of night to twist fate. Blind the eyes of Shepset, seal her tongue, let her words turn bitter in Par-Happy's ears. Jealousy too is ancient, and yet not all spells were about seduction or revenge. Some were prayers for protection. A young bride might wear a charm shaped like a frog, symbol of fertility, or carry a strip of folded papyrus with lines like, keep our beds sweet, keep our house whole, let our love grow as wheat in the sun. There were even public love rituals, festivals where women would dance beside sacred lakes, tossing garlands into the water, hoping their beloved would feel the tug. And there's a lovely strange ritual called the dream invocation. A person would sleep with a spell beneath their head, hoping for a dream sent by the gods, guidance, a glimpse, maybe even a sign of future love. Imagine that, whispering your heart's desire into the silence of night, then closing your eyes and waiting. It's a kind of magic we still practice today, isn't it? Wishing, hoping, dreaming. So as we leave this chapter behind, the scribe's shop, the jars of herbs, the whispering girls, we carry with us the gentle truth of Egypt, that love was never just a feeling, it was an action, a risk, a ritual, a spell, and maybe, just maybe, it still is. Now let the night settle over your thoughts like dust on an old scroll. The Nile laps gently in the distance. A frog croaks once, a cat slinks past a doorway, and soon we'll speak of something even more tender, of birth, of mothers, of lullabies whispered into dawn. Imagine this. The sun is just beginning to rise over the eastern banks of the Nile. The world glows with soft gold. Birds are beginning to stir, and somewhere behind thick clay walls, in a small dim room filled with incense and hushed chanting, a baby has just been born. A midwife smiles. She's done this many times. Her hands are steady. She wipes the infant clean with warm water steeped in myrrh and kisses its head. The mother sighs, exhausted but glowing. Birth in ancient Egypt wasn't just a physical act. It was a spiritual moment, rich with meaning, protection, and yes, a bit of magic. Let me show you how. First, picture the birth bricks. These weren't just bricks. They were sacred tools. 2 solid blocks a woman would squat on during delivery. Between them lay a protective mat. Around them, amulets were placed. Carved frogs, lions and goddesses with fierce, comforting eyes. Why frogs? Because they symbolized fertility. Frogs multiplied after the Nile's flood, and so did life. The logic was ancient but beautiful. And then there was Taweret. Ah, Taweret. She was the goddess who looked like a blend of hippo, crocodile, and lion. Fierce, strange, and absolutely adored. She guarded mothers. Her statues were placed near the birthing area. Her face, kind yet stern, watched over each moment, each breath, each cry. And if the labour was hard, incantations were whispered, words old as sand. Midwives called on Hathor and Bees. The woman might be given charms, or even cooled with scented cloths dipped in lotus water. Now picture the newborn. Once the child arrived, the real work began. The umbilical cord was cut with a flint knife. The baby was rubbed with oils, olive, castor, or something fragrant, then swaddled tightly in linen soft and warm. But perhaps the most touching moment came next. A priest or family elder would write the baby's name onto a scrap of pottery or papyrus. It was whispered aloud 3 times. Just like that, the baby became someone, a soul with identity, purpose, presence. They believed names held power. Imagine if your name was whispered into the walls of a temple. But what about the mother? Her care continued. A month of rest, daily baths, herbal teas to help with recovery. She might wear a necklace of carnelian stones to protect her from illness or the evil eye. And sometimes, older women sang lullabies. We don't know all the words. They vanished like perfume in the wind. But a few lines survived, etched into tomb walls or written into love poems that blurred the line between romantic and maternal. Sleep, my lotus. The sun will find you in dreams. My heart is a garden, and you are its flower. Soothing, isn't it? They believed babies were close to the divine, that their cries echoed the sound of new life, that the gods leaned in when they slept. Even the lullabies were layered with myth. Some mothers would hum stories of Horus and Isis, of the infant god hidden in reeds, protected from his murderous uncle. These weren't just bedtime tales. They were spiritual shields, a kind of whispered armour. And as the baby grew, there were rituals, a naming day, a first tooth charm. Little children wore protective amulets shaped like tiny hands or open eyes strung on leather or linen. And of course they had toys. Yes, toys. Wooden animals on wheels, dolls made of cloth or clay, rattles filled with pebbles. The kind of thing you could imagine hearing faintly in the background now. Ticka, 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 like a small child running across stone floors. Some things never change. The laughter of children, the sleep-deprived joy of new parents, the cooing sound a mother makes almost without thinking as she rocks her baby in the moonlight. Even in a time of gods and pyramids, there was tenderness. And in a way, that might be the most sacred thing of all. So now, let the sound soften. The baby has fallen asleep. The mother exhales a long, quiet sigh. Outside, the Nile flows on, eternal, gentle, cradling the whole country in its arms. Soon, we'll explore what came after this early innocence. Adolescence, first kisses, first dreams, first heartbreaks beneath palm trees and stars. But for now, let's stay in this small sacred room a little longer. The candle burns low, the cradle sways once, and the world feels just a bit more peaceful. Now, picture a quiet dusk over the Nile. The sun melts into rose gold on the river's skin, and a soft breeze stirs the reeds. In a small village near the edge of the desert, a boy steals a glance across a courtyard, and there she is. Her braid swings as she carries water. His heart thumps, not like a soldier's drum, but like a quiet little thud in the chest. A beginning, the earliest spark. First crushes in ancient Egypt. They were no less awkward, no less giddy than ours today. And yes, there were love letters. In fact, ancient Egyptians might have been some of the world's first hopeless romantics. Let me tell you a secret. They wrote poems that would make even modern love songs blush. One poem, inked neatly on papyrus, reads, "I passed by her door, but my heart stayed behind. Her voice is sweet as honey, her lips like pomegranate wine." Imagine being 14, barefoot in linen, scribbling those lines in charcoal while pretending to help your father with wheat storage. That's what young love was in Egypt. And the places they met? Oh, not much different than now. Teens would bump into each other at the market while fetching water or during harvest festivals. Places buzzing with music, colour, and the scent of roasted lentils and date cakes. At night, lanterns flickered, palm wine flowed, and when no one was watching, hands would brush, eyes would linger. It was all unspoken mostly, but felt. Do you remember your first flutter like that? They certainly did, and they captured it, in the way only a civilization obsessed with both beauty and permanence could. One boy carved a message into a shard of pottery. It simply said, "I would wait all day at the well, if only to see her eyes again." A pottery shard? History's version of a napkin doodle, really. Sometimes these feelings turned into secret courtships, not arranged by parents, not yet. Just shy conversations under fig trees or little offerings. A carved bird, a scented flower, a lotus tucked into a satchel when no one was looking. Some girls wore coal just a little darker for someone special. Some boys lingered by the edge of the field, hoping to accidentally run into her on her way home. One scribe even wrote, "She walks past my window. I pretend not to notice, but inside I burn like the sun." Yes, even the scribes got smitten. But what about heartbreak? It existed, of course. One surviving fragment tells of a girl crying beneath a tamarisk tree. Her lover had gone to Memphis and hadn't returned. She wrote on parchment, "I dream of him, but dreams do not warm the bed." Simple, soft, sad, but not hopeless. Because Egyptian love wasn't always tragic, it was hopeful, passionate, almost playful. Many spells and charms were written specifically to win back a lost love or catch the eye of a crush. Some involved crushing herbs. Others invoked Hathor, goddess of love, asking her to make him restless until he seeks me. Would you like to hear one? It went something like this. "As the sun follows the moon, so shall his heart follow mine." Sweet, isn't it? Even the gods, they believed, knew the ache of longing. Isis searched the world for Osiris. Hathor wept tears that flooded the Nile. So, why wouldn't a young girl weep over a boy who promised he'd be back by the flood season? And what about weddings? When two hearts matched, whether by arrangement or affection, they would quietly begin living together. No formal ceremony, no grand hall, just shared bread, shared mats, shared dreams. One inscription said, "I found a home in her laughter." Isn't that enough of a vow? So now, close your eyes and picture it. A quiet evening, two young lovers under the stars. She hums a lullaby her mother once sang. He carves their names into a palm tree. The Nile flows quietly beside them, and somewhere, in a nearby house, a mother smiles, perhaps remembering her own first love. And with that, we let the scroll close. We've wandered through myths, marriage, magic, meals and lullabies, from the temples of Karnak to the hush of a desert kiss. You've walked through ancient bedrooms, kitchens, festivals and fields, touched linen and gold, shared date wine, watched love bloom and fade. And now, as the story closes, may you drift not into history, but into dreams. Thank you for traveling this gentle path with me tonight. If you felt yourself soften, if sleep found you like a breeze through the reeds, maybe tap like, or subscribe, only if it feels right to your soul. And if you're still awake, tell me below what memory stayed with you. Until next time, may these old whispers guard your rest. Sweet dreams, the candle fades, the Nile still flows,